Hey guys, thanks for joining me for another episode of the Friday Reporter podcast. I'm trying to switch it up here. 4.5 years in, you get tired of hearing the same music, tired of hearing the same start. So it's time to really do something a little different, a little fresher. I got to tell you, today's guest has been on my list for as long as I've had this show. Dan Clifton and I have been friends for over 20 years. He's a partner and head of policy research for Strategas Securities. He is among the brightest guys in the business, no doubt about it. Every time I spend time with him, I get smarter. So get excited. He talks to communicators like us, helps us understand what it is we need to know. Not only is he a sought after voice on CNBC and a variety of other spaces, news reporters and heads of state all call Dan for advice. He's brilliant. He's funny. It's going to be a great conversation. Let's get into it. Dan Clifton, I'm so glad to have finally caught you for a conversation.
Well,
Thank
thank you
you.
for having me. It's going to be great conversation today.
So, all right, I'm going to walk you back a little bit. I want you to tell me the story. I mean, it all started at Rutgers University.
Yeah, sure.
This great pathway that led you here to Washington, D.C. Walk me through how it is you started your career and how you got going in this space.
Yeah. Well, Lisa, first, thanks for having me on. I'm a huge fan of your show, so it's an honor to be here today. And, we started in New Jersey politics together. I was a Rutgers University student in the mid-'90s, and I worked at an organization called the Housing Mortgage Finance Agency part-time. We financed affordable housing, and it was in Trenton. And I got locked into all the fun stuff about politics and started getting engaged in Republican politics at the time. Christy Whitman was governor. It led to me organizing Rutgers students in the governor's election. And part of this is being prepared and part of this is being lucky. There was some concern that there wouldn't be enough people at the buses on election day, and there would be a reporter there who would see that, and that would be the story for the day. And I, as a lovely college student, said to very senior officials on the campaign, like, are you kidding me? There's going to be so many people that my life is in danger when I can't get everybody on the buses. And it turned out to be overflow capacity. And my team was put into Monmouth County, which is a county that you know very well, and was one of the last to report on election day. They got to report it first and it wouldn't matter, but they report it last and it put the governor over top. And before you know it, I left the housing industry where I was very much into economics, and I joined the governor's office after that. And I worked amazing jobs in the New Jersey government. I worked in the authorities unit, which oversaw the authorities. I worked with all the different toll roads and Atlantic City development. I eventually then went to go work in some of those authorities. So I worked at the Port Authority of New York and New Jersey in the World Trade Center. Worked for their chief economist. I worked at the Casino Reinvestment Development Authority, which takes the money from the casinos and reinvestment back into the community. So I had a really good experience in New Jersey government. And then I went back into the governor's office for that transition between Whitman when she went to the EPA and then the new governor, then eventually to the campaign. And I went from like loading up college students in 1997 to working for the governor's chief of staff by 2001. So in one cycle from bottom to the top, and it was awesome. And obviously then I moved down to DC in 2002 and went away from government and got into nonprofit and lobbying. And in particular, what I really enjoy is tax policy. And at that time, President Bush was cutting taxes every year. So it was a really good time to be working on tax policy and getting accustomed to that. Eventually, that just led to connections on Wall Street. I had this guy, Larry Kudlow. I don't know if you know Larry Kudlow. I was friends with Larry Kudlow. And he was friends with some other people and he put us together. And, again, it's like luck. And they started their own firm. They asked me to come run the Washington office. That was 17 years ago, or I'm sorry, 19 years ago when that happened. And we were just a small startup firm. And today we're a pretty successful firm and have 60 employees, clients in 46 countries. So it's turned out real well. And it's been a good ride.
You are the most reserved. What you do, I mean, changes lives. Okay. So, and we'll get into all of that.
Yeah, sure.
I will never forget coming in or agreeing to take up the job in Governor DeFrancesco's office.
Yeah.
And the first person I saw was you.
Yeah.
And you were like, this is going to be great.
It
And I
is.
will never forget the enthusiasm. You bring it to everything you do,
Yeah.
friend. I mean, honestly. And I said it, I say it all the time. I feel like every time we visit, I get smarter. For someone who's in communication, who has to understand complex issues and distill it into simple to understand messages, you teach me something every time we visit. The reason why it seemed when you made the move from your previous spot to be at Strategas,
Yeah.
the reason why it seemed so timely and so relevant was it came at a time when Washington and Wall Street really
Yep.
instinctively they needed to understand one another better. And you, from my point of view, have been the linchpin for so many people to help understand and translate one another to make sure that that policy works.
Well, you're very kind to say that, but let me just take one step back. When I started in this business, and what we do specifically is we try and understand what's happening in Washington. That could be the White House, it could be Congress, it could be the regulatory agencies, it could be the Federal Reserve. And then we try and figure out what those actions are going to be and how it will impact financial markets and the economy. So we, like, partisan politics are out the door. Like, we don't have the luxury of choosing one side or one issue. We just got to know what's likely going to happen and what the impact of that's going to be. When I got into this job, we were at the precipice of this being a major growth industry. I was the lowest guy on the totem pole in my firm in 2007. And then the financial crisis happened and everything else, where Washington just had a much greater impact over financial markets. And we used to joke like Washington as the new financial center. And that tends to be the case today, where what happens here is what really does dominate financial markets and the economy. And I often say, as an American, I want to be the least important person in my firm because that means everything's going well. Unfortunately, we become more important. And it's just there has to be a level of communication between the two, given the importance of that. And I'll just give you this one example, Lisa. In 2008, companies would fill out where their biggest risks to their business are as part of an SEC documentation. And at that time, about 25% of companies labeled Washington as their largest risk. Those companies were mostly government dependent. They were healthcare companies that were dependent on reimbursement, or defense companies, or utility companies. By 10 years later, more than half of the S&P 500 was saying that Washington is their greater risk. And it was like 75% were in the top two risks. So you just saw this greater impact happen. You see more policy uncertainty. You see more political volatility. And what we try to do is just break through that noise and say, this is what's important at the end of the day. And I don't have to tell you, because you're a community, there's so much noise out there. But you can really get to those kind of fine lines of how much stimulus is there, what's the Fed going to do, how big of the impact of the tariffs are going to be. And what I like to say is, like, when we worked together in the New Jersey governor's office, one of the things that we did was we rebuilt the briefings office so that when the governor went into a town, he knew exactly how much aid they had. Now, this is, education or property tax. This is 25 years ago when that happened, right? There was no big data. Most of it was on documents, and we had to put that in. And so I was like the data guy trying to help political people do better, or policy people do better. Today it's quite the reverse. Now I'm the political guy trying to help the data people figure out where those solutions are. So it's been a little bit of a mix, but I think it's very critical to understand that sometimes what goes on here is not very rational, and to be able to kind of cut through that.
It amazes me. First off, you have a stamina for this kind of work. It shows that you are incredibly passionate for it. You have a team of only 16 people.
Yep.
And I say only because you guys punch above your weight every single day. I know you don't sleep very much. You guys are up so early in the morning. I mean, when you talk about a political intelligence firm,
Yep.
that's the way you operate. I mean, talk to me a little bit about that, because that cycle, you provide is it a daily report to your clients? I mean, what you produce every morning is more impressive than a political campaign, and you serve it up
every single day of the week. Every day the market is open. Is that right?
That's correct. Yes.
Yeah.
And we put out a Saturday note just to recap the week as well. But let me again, I'll just take one step back. Like, I have the most amazing team that you can ever imagine. Right. So I get to just take their great work and make it nice and interesting and stuff. But like, this is a grind job because it's a morning business and you got to be the first one out in the morning, or, people will just not even acknowledge you on the other side, because it's a very competitive business itself. And so what we're doing is we're getting up very early in the morning. We're trying to figure out exactly what people need to know. But we also have our broader themes that are going to change no matter what's in the news there itself. And then we put that together. And my team, I mean, the three people that I have that sit on the other side of this wall. One is a guy named Chris McGrath. He was our intern in 2017. He knows the way the Treasury and the Federal Reserve plumbing of the entire financial system works, probably better than most people in the government right now. Like, it's an incredible thing to do. And he was a baseball player. He got drafted into, the Major League Baseball draft. And I like to say, like, he throws 90 miles an hour. He is a better data analyst than he was a pitcher.
Wow.
And so he basically knows how all that plumbing works. And then I have Courtney Gelman, who sits next to him. And she literally takes everything here in Washington and figures out which companies are going to be affected by that and builds the investment implication. Because if we're just talking about, what's going on in Washington, that's no different than what you could see on TV or read in the newspaper or see on X.
That's right.
What makes it different is we actually can get to the implication of what that's going to be, whether it's on a macro basis or on a company level basis. And Courtney is the center of that. And then I have Jeanette Lowe. And what Jeanette does is she's in the legislation. She understands where the quirks and nuances are. And then we take that, we wrap it all up into a product that is very differentiated and very different than what people are going to read in the newspaper or see on TV. And again, after 19 years, it's gotten much better over time, but it is a team effort. No one individual can do this all on their own. And the work that they do is just absolutely out of this world. And it gets better every day.
No question. I've seen you in a room full of staff directors, Capitol Hill staff directors.
Right.
The people are hanging on your every word. And I don't say this because you're my friend, Dan. I mean this sincerely. Like, I am in awe of the incredible work that you do, because not only are you informing companies and clients and work, you're also doing everything you can to help policymakers and other people inside of Washington also understand the implications, not from a political point of view, but from an economic point of view, how it is this policy can change, the lives of so many, or the industry, or you name it. So you do a lot of research and resourcing for policymakers as well.
Absolutely. There's very big restrictions on how we can talk to policymakers, which I understand and completely respect. And so the best way to think about what we're doing is we're advising them on how financial markets will respond. So it's much more one way, like us talking to them on different options. And I'll just give you one example. Like, we passed one big, beautiful bill in July, major tax legislation. And there are two routes that you can take in designing your tax policy. So we have a whole bunch of tariffs that have been put in place. They're probably going to slow economic growth. And you want to use this tax bill to sterilize the negative impact of those tariffs so that you can avoid a recession. And, I think from our vantage point was, if you lower the income tax rate with that tariff revenue, you can adjust the paychecks almost immediately. You just change the withholding, and then every American will get a raise right away. And that tax relief would have already have kicked in for Americans. But what they did was quite the opposite. They basically said, okay, well, we'll have a whole bunch of refunds come out in February, March, and April, because the issues we're dealing with are the state and local tax deduction, or the child credit, or no tax on tips. And so you have a tsunami of tax refunds that are going to come out in February, March, and April. And so we calculate how big of an impact that's going to be. The delta on that is about $150 billion. Okay, so that's like an enormous number. It's about 0.5% of GDP, and it's really going to move the consumer. But if you look at everything that's going on in politics today, is that you just had elections last week. Americans are worried about affordability. They're not getting any credit for those, for One Big Beautiful Bill because nobody's felt it yet. And that was really a design issue, right? So we say, okay, here's option 1, here's option 2, here's option 3. This is the way it's going to impact. And they probably would have had a much better economic and by extension, political response if they had done it through the income tax rate. I understand, they were a bit handcuffed, so they've done it through the refund side. But then we can look at it and say, okay, what's going to happen when tax refund season starts, and who's going to be able to get those refunds at the lower end and the middle income part of the spectrum? And that's basically underappreciated by the consensus on Wall Street on how big that tax refund's going to be. And it's even less understood here in Washington overall, which is really interesting to me because it is a Washington policy and people just don't understand. They're like, oh yeah, we're going to get refunds. No. It may be outside COVID, the largest tax refund distribution as a percentage of the economy that we've ever done.
That's going to have an impact on midterms though, huh? That'll have some impact on midterms, right?
And it may, but it explains why voters haven't seen any of the benefit. Maybe they are going to get a benefit. But as you know, Lisa, we've been doing this a long time. Voters are like, what have you done for me lately? By October,
I know. That's why I'm thinking March, April.
About all this.
March, April, that's not until November. So that's a long trajectory. Yeah. I want to get into really the real meat of our conversation today. Sure. I want to talk about the lobbying index. I don't think enough of my listeners and my colleagues and our friends in town really know enough about this remarkable thing that you've built. So I want you to walk me through it and tell me about it, because I think communicators and folks in town are going to see the value in what it is that you've built here. So talk me through the lobbying index specifically.
Yeah, sure. So the lobbying index is really a wonderful tool that everybody in Washington needs to understand. So what this does is it basically quantifies the impact of government affairs on companies' earnings. So if you are a company lobbyist, this is a great tool to be able to go back to your corporate headquarters and be like, we're not spending enough on lobbying. We're spending too much on lobbying. Here's the value that I present to the company overall. And it is a really, really useful tool. Now, that's not why we created this. What happened was Bear Stearns went down in March of 2008. And this is before Lehman collapsed in September of 2008. We spent that summer of 2008 trying to understand if there were going to be political variables that historically have impacted stock performance. And I got to tell you, everything failed. We tried PAC funding. We tried it on individual companies. None of it really worked. And then we hit gold. We figured out that lobbying, not in an aggregate dollar, but just kind of relative to the size of the company, was very statistically significant on the top 50 companies overall, and that it was really impacting stock performance overall. Those companies that were dedicating to government affairs were getting this kind of outsized return in the equity market. Now, I just want to tell you, in the investment world, Lisa, there's something called back testing. And whenever you do this, the back testing, it always works, right? And then you get into real life and things change and it never works. So we were pretty cautious in 2008, but the equity market went down 40% that year because of the financial crisis. Our lobbying index only went down 28%. So to get a 12% spread is really, it's an enormous difference, but I kind of held it back. And then the beginning of 2009 started and I said, well, we'll just keep testing it. And the pitchforks were coming out, who created this crisis? Unemployment is high. And I just went public with my lobbying index. And I said, listen, these are the companies that have a seat at the table. And so if the pitchforks come out, maybe they'll have some level of protection. And so we really kind of measure it from 2009 on. And it's amazing what happened. The basket of stocks outperformed in 2009, in 2010, in 2011, in 2012, and 13, and it just kept on going. And by the way, it changes. We update based on lobbying quarterly data.
Sure.
And we had outperformance from about 2009 to 2017 every single year. So think about everything that happened in that, the debt ceiling fight and the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act and Obamacare. And what we started to realize, like all the healthcare stocks would begin to outperform after Obamacare passed. And it really is a magnificent tool. We've broadened that tool out now, and we can do it for small and mid companies. We do it for non-US companies that lobby here. That's where we get the most outperformance. And it's actually very, very robust in these. And then we do it on very specific issues. Like right now, we're working on defense technology. So this whole idea of these kind of technology companies that are improving the U.S. national security, or and I know that it may sound like a little kind of slimy, or like why. It is not in any way. What it's telling you is that companies are making an investment in Washington like they would for research and development purposes, with the idea that they're going to get some sort of return on that.
Sure.
And what we found is that the market doesn't know how to price what that return is going to be. And because we can do this across size, it really is important, because if I just took the largest lobbying spenders, they're basically the largest companies in America.
Of course.
But we have owned, company like Vertex Pharmaceuticals, which does cystic fibrosis, which doesn't have a very large expenditure, but they are out there educating every day about the benefits that they're providing to Americans for cystic fibrosis. And the work they're doing is revolutionary. And they have a great story to tell. And you can understand why different companies have different reasons to be in the game. And we're really trying to measure that intensity of that company relative to their business overall. And that's why we could do it across themes. We could do it across size. We could do it across geography. It is pretty universal, and it's magnificent, because I think it really does represent why people are here in Washington. And I just think that lobbying gets a bad name. And obviously every industry is going to have bad apples, but the good that it does is much greater than any of the negative responses that these media organizations write about.
I mean, it justifies the work we do and shows the value in the investment that's being made in that. So that's fantastic. Where do I send people? Like, where do people go to find out more about it?
Yeah, so we run that through our asset management business, which is a little different than our research business. So that you could just do like Strategas ETFs or Strategas Asset Management. You just type that up. Our fund is called the Strategas Global Policy Opportunities Fund, SAGP, and it has a lot of the background about what we're doing and what our big themes are as we think about kind of what the big lobbying trends are. Or you can reach out to me directly. And I'll be more than happy to get you any information that you need.
I think it's so tremendously cool. Every time we talk about it, it just makes so much sense to me. And it would take someone that has a fundamental understanding of both Wall Street and Washington, D.C.
Cool.
to be able to put that information together and to use that and to know that it's outperformed. I mean, my understanding from at least maybe until 19 this year, outperformed S&P 500. Right? I mean, there was like an overperformance for a lot of years.
Yeah. So, I mean, that's the benchmark, right? You could buy an index fund and have the S&P. And what we're trying to do for our clients is basically get a return that's in excess of that.
Yeah.
And it's very hard to do. It's very hard to do on a continuous basis. Just things change, the economy changes. And so people say, just buy an index fund. And so if you can get that kind of active management that continually gets a return above the regular benchmark, that's fine. That's like what you're going for. I think what made the lobbying index important over the last decade was that when you'd have a down year, it would do better. And even when you had an up year, most funds was doing the opposite itself. We've moved away from that just kind of core large cap US lobbying index. Now we're trying to get it into broader. Our clients are global. So, like one of our largest holdings is Hyundai Electric, which does a lot of electric power generation, which is a huge theme here in Washington because we need the power to generate the AI.
That's right.
And you get that. So I was just in Korea last week. Everybody was excited that we own a Korean company, in there. It's a global business and it's a global market of stocks, and we try and capture that. And you'd be surprised how many non-US companies are here in Washington making the case for their products, and even more so today than you would have saw 10 years ago.
Well, I think it's illustrative of the level of complexity, but understanding that you have. The fact that you could take that kind of information and turn it into an actionable
Yeah.
product that makes tremendous sense, validates the work we do here, but also it demonstrates to the globe how incredibly important it is to stay involved in the public dialogue, right?
Yeah.
That's the other thing too that I see.
That's what I tell every company that I meet with is, even if you're not lobbying, you just need to have an ear to the ground, and you need to have it in this environment. I mean, when I look at what happened over the course of this year, there are these great economists from Stanford and University of Chicago who measure policy uncertainty. In April of this year, we had the highest level of policy uncertainty ever recorded in history. Okay. So like, what was going on tariffs affected every single company. So you may say, hey, I'm selling my widget. I don't need to know what's going on in Washington. Now you don't know what your supply chain is going to be for your widget. And the companies that had an ear to the ground understood, one, what was coming, two, how to work around it. They weren't getting any special treatment. Trump is very clear. He's not giving any exemptions, but the ability to understand the trend, the ability to know how to adjust to those trends. And, we generally view that policy uncertainty as pretty good because it creates this environment where it gets fixed if it's too bad. And from a forward-looking market indicator, but those companies that were here on the ground, based on our measure, had much better performance than the companies that didn't have any on the ground. And
That's so interesting you say
the
that
way of
too.
quantifying it.
It's so interesting you say that too, because people always say that the market likes stability, the market likes to know what to expect. But what you're saying is a little bit different there. You're saying that volatility is okay. Not volatility maybe, but some unpredictability is okay.
Yeah, and what I'm saying is we're going to get more of this political volatility.
That's the
It's
choice
not
we
going
have.
away anytime soon.
That's
So
right.
you need to adjust to it. I'd rather have no volatility, to be honest with you, right?
Of
I go back
course.
to my life and watching baseball and not worry about any of this stuff. Unfortunately, that's not the world we live in.
No.
And so you need to have your ear to the ground. I think what's happening in the world right now is that we've just gone through a 35-year period where the Berlin Wall went down, the world globalized, inflation was low, interest rates were low, geopolitical volatility was low. And that period is basically coming to an end. And so you're reversing that post-Berlin Wall coming down environment. And so if that's the case, you're going to have deglobalization, slightly higher inflation, slightly higher interest rates, more geopolitical volatility. And that makes it more important for companies to have their ear to the ground here in Washington because of that volatility that's actually happening. And I like to say it's not bearish. It just requires an adjustment. And those who figure out that we're adjusting are going to be the winners in this. And I'm hopeful that we're going back to like an 80s period, that we'll actually get another Rocky IV or Top Gun movie out of it.
Let's go.
Great movies. I enjoyed the 80s.
They hold it really well too.
But it will be a very different environment than what most of our professional careers were about, which was, free trade, globalization. Those periods are over. It doesn't matter which party wins. Which party is determining the speed at which we do that. That's very different than if, it's how.
All right. So moving into the last part of our conversation, I'm curious. You're always really good about telling me what to be watching for.
Yeah.
Like what's next? What's around the corner? What are you watching? What are you paying attention to maybe that others in Washington aren't quite watching yet?
Yeah. So I'm watching a couple of things. Number one, what's happening at the Federal Reserve is pretty important. They're in a very divided split right now over whether to cut interest rates or not. Half the committee believes tariffs are creating inflation. Half the committee believe that those tariffs are slowing economic growth. And it's leading to a very important divide, one that you usually do not see at the Federal Reserve. So what's going to happen is Trump's going to appoint his new Fed chairman in the next couple of weeks. That person won't take over for a couple of months. But how the Fed is going to do its monetary policy will be key to the economic outlook. As I mentioned before, the implementation of one big beautiful bill, not just the consumer aid that we talked about, but companies are going to get $135 billion to write down any type of factories that they're doing or cap good orders that they're purchasing or research and development. This is all designed to bring onshoring into effect. Then I would keep an eye really on this energy issue, because you were probably watching the New Jersey election, Virginia election. Electricity costs were a very big issue in that election. And I think that this is going to cause some sort of response in Washington whether it's about doing pipeline siting or even something broader as Congress looks to do something on that issue before the midterm election. I also wouldn't be surprised if you see something on housing, given that young people are being locked out of their home, not being able to buy homes because of high mortgage rates. So there is a lot going on right now in Washington. And then if that's not enough for you, the Supreme Court's going to rule on Trump's tariffs probably over the next 6 to 8 weeks. We think that Trump has a full replacement plan that's legal. We think that they're going to put it into place almost immediately. So it may not be as big of a deal. But man, when that news story hits on that Supreme Court ruling, it will be a big news story. So no shortage of topics here from Washington: trade, tax, monetary policy, energy policy. And then when that's all over, we got to figure out how the government's going to stay open on January 30th and whether there's going to be a healthcare deal ahead of that. It's a lot to chew on for a low bandwidth place.
I hope you're
I think it reinforces this conversation that you're going to need to be in the game with all these different issues going on.
Absolutely. Keep your caffeine flowing. Yeah, I totally agree. There's so much. And I have 100 questions related to all of that, but this is just a 30-minute show. So I'll have to have you back for more. Dan, if we're not catching you paying attention to markets or paying attention to Washington, D.C., what keeps you busy outside of your work?
Well, I have a wonderful wife and 2 wonderful kids who are 9 and 5, which are great ages. And, we do lots of fun stuff together. It's very important to have that family time together. I mean, I travel all over. As soon as I come home, my kids electrify me, right? So we are a very big baseball family. We travel, we go to All-Star game, we do all that fun stuff.
I love it.
It's pretty cool. Both my kids are like really into it, and probably more into it than I am. And I just feed that beast for them. So
I love it.
I think it's what keeps us happy. And it's very interesting. I mean, I just think that sports are going to play a bigger role because it's the one thing that unifies our country at a time when we're being divided almost every single day. And I think it will be a big trend. We like to look a lot at demographics, and what you see is this kind of younger family beginning to emerge. They're huge in size relative to the population. And they're going to get into youth sports and they're going to get into these types of activities. And then that starts creating demand for professional sports activity. And it's one of our big investment themes, as well as that. I think it's going to be a very growing trend. And as that trend comes into place as a unifying figure on us. And so I'm really bullish on the U.S. I mean, every time I look at X, I went off X for like 6 months up until last week. But like every time I look at it, I get like totally depressed watching everybody yelling at each other. But like when you break that apart, there's a lot more that unifies us than divides us. And my sense is that over time, that's going to become a lot more apparent, particularly when geopolitical pressures build up. I think sports are the ultimate unifier.
Oh, I love that. Well, let's go Yankees. Because I
Let's
know
go
you.
Yankees. Yes.
I know we share that love.
That's right.
Dan, here we are. We're at the end of our conversation, 30 minutes in. I've got to ask, who should I talk to for another episode?
Yeah. So if you think about all the conversations that we just had today, I like to look at different industries and say, what industry is, really good at the government affairs game overall. I would suggest Scott Leganga from pharma, who has worked in all the different components of pharma, and they do very, very good work. I would suggest somebody else to you, Nadia Paps, who is an energy lobbyist and worked in all the different various forms of energy, given the importance that you'll see on electricity policy in 2026. Given the impact of affordability and all the other issues that are going to dominate the midterm elections.
I'm going to put them both on the list, and I'm going to tell them that you nominated them.
That's great.
Dan, I am just so glad to have caught you today. Thank you so much. This is always, as I said, I learn something new every time I talk to you. I'm so grateful for you, and I can't wait to catch up again.
Likewise. Thank you for having me on. Appreciate it very much, Lisa.
Well, there you have it. Another episode of the Friday Reporter podcast. Thanks so much for joining me. If you are at all interested in supporting the show, don't forget to like, subscribe, and offer a friendly comment, because that's the way other people find it. It's how you found me today. I also want to say a special thanks to Dylan and the team at Two River Pictures. They help me sound smarter, look smarter, and, deliver this show to you guys every week. So if you have an interest in joining or being a podcaster yourself, they're the team you want to go to. I also want to say a special thanks to my team at Be the Brand Collective, who I work with on marketing. They help me every week with a variety of content and opportunities also. Thanks again for joining me for another episode of The Friday Reporter, and I'll see you again soon.